Hello and welcome. I'm Carla McLaren. In my book, The Art of Empathy, I organized empathy into 6 essential aspects to not only help myself sort of get my mind around the research that has been done on empathy, but also to create a model for you to use to figure out if your empathy is too low, why, where, how, and if your empathy is too overwhelming, why, where, and how, and what can you do about it. So The Art of Empathy it's called A Complete Guide to Life's Most Essential Skill, and it is. So if you are not comfortable with your empathy in either direction, this book, and it's also an audio workshop program, will help you figure out exactly what's going on. Empathy is not this kind of la la la, I'm empathic kind of a thing. You can identify the specific aspects of empathy, and you can address each one so that you'll be more comfortable in your relationships. Right? The 6 aspects of empathy, and I'll go through them quickly because I'm going to be doing a specific video on each one. The 6 aspects of empathy are: 1, emotion contagion. That sounds terrible, right? But emotion contagion is, I gathered that from the research. And basically emotion contagion is your capacity to engage emotionally, to understand that an emotion is in the room, or that an emotion is expected of you, right? So that's the first place. Something has to be sort of emotionally evocative, and then the empathy begins. Step 2, empathic accuracy. This is your capacity to understand which emotion it is out of the 17 that I've identified in my work, and what the context is. That's your empathic accuracy. The third is emotion regulation. This is a very crucial step, because if you're in step 1 taking in a lot of emotion, let's say it's a room full of people who are upset, right? And you know what each of the emotions are because your empathic accuracy is good, but you get up to this 3rd step of emotion regulation and you don't have any skills, oops, all that emotion is just going to overwhelm you. So emotion regulation is really a key aspect of empathy that will make the full flowering of empathy happen, or it's a key aspect that if you don't have it, will pretty much stop empathy right there and most likely throw you into empathic burnout. So emotion regulation is crucial. And my first book, The Language of Emotions, is all about emotion regulation. So we got you covered, okay? The 4th step, once you've known that emotion is occurring, identified it and the context, managed and regulated your own emotions. The 4th step is perspective taking, right? Whose emotion is this? What is my emotion about? What would that person like to have happen? What would I like to have happen? Who's important in this situation and who's not? It's your capacity to really sort of stand back and take an eagle-eye view of what's going on. Rather, if you don't have good perspective-taking skills, you might think, well, you might have, felt the emotion contagion and then been empathically accurate. You know which emotion it is. You've regulated your own emotion. And then if you don't have perspective-taking abilities, you might say, well, here's what I would do, right? And whose perspective are you taking? You're taking your own. So an important piece of empathy is that you are taking the perspective of the other, right? You need to know what they need. And if you can regulate your own emotions, you'll be calm enough and focused enough to be able to focus on the other person rather than yourself, right? The 5th step is called concern for others. Once you know an emotion is happening, and then you know which emotion it is, and you know how to regulate it, and you can take perspective and know who's who and what's what, you actually have to care, right? You have to have that compassion or that concern that you would actually want to meet the needs of the other. And sometimes you don't, right? It's okay not to. But what's interesting for me, I was really trying to figure out, where does concern for others go? Where does perspective taking go? I kept moving them back and forth to the fourth and the fifth position. I was like, and then I thought, oh wait, con artists. A con artist, they say that con artists are unempathic, but come on, they're awesome at it. They have to read you. They have to know which emotions you're feeling specifically. They need to be able to regulate their own emotions. They need to be able to take your perspective and see how you would like to hear things that they're going to manipulate you about, right? They have to be really very, very expert at the first 4 stages of empathy, but to have zero concern for others, right? Because they're going to manipulate you into buying something or doing something that just really isn't in your best interests. So concern, I was like, okay, good. Thank you, con artists, right? Because concern for others comes after, right? So it is a more evolved aspect of empathy, okay? So with concern for others, you're going to care enough to make the next step, which is step 6, which I call perceptive engagement. Perceptive engagement is not always an action, because sometimes the most perceptive and empathic thing you can do is nothing. And I think that's something that's really, really not understood very well. For instance, and I talk about this a lot, excuse me, a well-dressed man is walking down the street, and he has his briefcase, and he's going somewhere, and he trips over a crack in the sidewalk. He doesn't fall, he just trips, but he becomes disheveled. And the first thing he does is whip his head around to look and see if anybody saw him trip. And empath, look at that bird. You know, if you're in the street or anywhere near him, you're just like, wow, look at that building. That's awesome. Right? You don't, if he doesn't want to be seen, you don't see him, right? That's the skill. And of course you would keep him, you know, in your peripheral vision to make sure. A lot of times right after people trip, you know, all of their endorphins come up and they keep moving and they don't realize they just broke their toe or something. So you would keep an eye, you know, a surreptitious eye on him, but you wouldn't go over and go, you know, oh, sir, I saw you trip, you know. The guy would not only have a hurt foot, but now he would be just filled with shame that he didn't want to have. So I put perceptive engagement at the top because it means that you're perceiving, you're taking perspective, you care enough to know what it is that that person needs rather than what it is that I need in order to look like an awesome empathic person, right? So a lot of times, very empathic people won't look obviously empathic because they're perceiving what the other person needs. So with these 6 steps, with these 6 aspects of empathy that I identified not only from the research but from my own life experience, you can begin to enter into the previously mysterious world of empathy and understand exactly what's going on, exactly where your skills are, and exactly where your challenges are. I welcome you to the world of empathy. It is someone interviewed me and said, you know, what would you say empathy is? And empathy is required for communication, for your interaction with art and dance and music and beauty. It's required for understanding things. I basically said empathy is everything. So developing your skills in empathy is not like some kind of soft skill. I'm so empathic. Rather, it is a development of your capacity to interact with other people, with animals, with ideas, with art, with literature, with the world. Empathy is everything. I look forward to seeing you soon as we look specifically at each of the 6 aspects of empathy. See ya.